the most recent book that I did is for a South Korean publisher, and it's in Korean, and it is A Scandal in Bohemia, Sherlock Holmes, which...
So how did that come about?
I still don't really know how that came about, because I just got this email one day and they said, we'd like you to do this, and we're a South Korean publisher, and this is a Western story, and we think that a Western writer would probably do better than a South Korean one. We don't know anything about England in the 1800s. I didn't either. But anyway, so there's this is, it's all in Korean, and I've got a friend at church who's supposedly in the process of translating it for me, but it's been a long time since I talked to her about it, so I don't know how far we're coming. But I have been a Sherlock Holmes fan for most of my life, and so the opportunity to do a Sherlock Holmes book was just like a gift. And
so do you have to make the characters in here look British or Korean, or?
Well, no, they wanted it all. They wanted it to look British, and what I did, because again I didn't have very much time, so all of the backgrounds are I built them out of other when I do photographic stuff, I make photographs of things that don't exist. So I will chop a zillion photographs up into little pieces and glue them back together, so to speak.
Okay.
And then I will copy parts of them to other parts. So I will make something that looks photographic, but it's only in my brain. So it's not really a photograph. And then I try to make my drawings as photographic as I can, so that when I superimpose the two of them, it doesn't. And then I run the manufactured photograph through kind of the filter to make it look less photographic. So the goal is to make my drawings more photographic and the photographs less photographic. By the time I put them together, they look kind of compatible. And my wife is usually my major editor on that, because she says, why do you do that? she has this marvelous style. Yeah, really is. Hello. So I have like 6 or 7 CDs of background material. This is one of those projects that I worked 100 hours a week for 6 weeks on. And the interesting thing about working with the South Koreans is that they're a little behind the digital times, so I ended up sending them the prints rather. I mean, they wanted original art, but there was no original art since it was all done on the computer. So I printed it up and sent them the prints, and then they photographed the prints and did whatever, because they're still working with photography and the printing processes that used to get done last century. And actually the book came out better than my book, because they did some fun things like this little section here. I never saw that before. That part's my drawing, and these little, little thumbnails are my drawings, but they recombined it and did some fun stuff with it. So it came out a great book.
So how do people find you? I mean,
I have no idea. I wish I had an idea, because then I could direct more of them that way. I have.
You have a website.
I have a website,
which is
mjarts.com.
mjarts.com.
Yeah.
If people want to go to that, they can see.
MJARTS.
Okay.
People usually think MJarts. No, it's MJ Arts.
Okay, for Marty Jones.
Marty Jones, right?
Okay.
And I have portfolios on probably a dozen other people's websites, Illustrator websites, printing websites, just anything that I can get a hold of. Over the years, I have invested thousands and thousands of dollars in marketing, all of which have reaped nothing that I can find directly, because the books that I've done didn't come from any of my advertising that I'm aware of. So and because the editor that I worked with on this book is Korean and speaks primarily Korean, she has some English, but not a whole lot of English. So our emails were kind of, they worked okay, but there was a real obvious gap in the
Like
in
reading the instructions sometimes.
something like that, yeah.
If you're just joining us, I'm talking to Marty Jones. He's an illustrator, and his website is mjarts.com. Talking about how in the world you managed to get work and keep the mortgage paid.
Well, yeah, the mortgage paid part comes from my work as a consultant mostly.
Okay.
One of the benefits of my having done the work with City of Portland is I learned an awful lot about the building code, and I left there supposedly to receive a small disability retirement, because it's not because of the hand, but of a variety of chronic issues. That my doctor said, sure, no problem, you'll be able to get that, and then you'll be able to do illustration full-time. And the insurance company for the city said, no, you just don't like your job, which I thought I liked my job, but they told me that, no, you just don't like your job, and no, you're not getting a retirement, you're now unemployed. So that was kind of a shock. So I became a consultant, and that's been what I've been doing for a long time. But in this kind of economy, nobody does anything particularly new and innovative and exciting, which is the only time you really need to hire a building code consultant, because the rest of it's all written in the book. You just got to know where to find it. But it makes for an interesting life.
Well, this is one thing that I noticed in your biographical information. You're a man of great faith. Tell me about that as how it relates to illustration for you. There was something about a sense of wonder.
Yeah, a sense of wonder. The other day, someone described me as being a person who's always curious and always trying to find out why. And for me, my experiences with God have always been one of, wow. But at the same time, even though I believe that there is a guiding hand that goes on behind all of the very bizarre things that are going on in the world, I don't imagine that I will ever be able to figure out what that guiding hand is trying to do, because I'm finite and God is infinite. And I think of it like, if you pull up a rock one day, and all those little squiggly things that are under the rock, compared to an infinite and all-powerful and all-knowing God and all-loving God, we're kind of like those little squiggly things that are underneath the rock there. And one day God said, how can I possibly communicate with those little squiggly things under the rock? And so he became a man and lived as much as God could live in a human body, and died and was resurrected, and said, you know, you can do that too. And I will guide you through life. I won't tell you necessarily where you're going or why bad things happen, because sometimes bad things happen. Kids have ear infections and they have to be sent to hospitals, and we can't possibly tell a 5-year-old why we're doing this to them, but it has to be done in order to make it go through. So when I look at the world, it is usually going, wow, this is really, it's either really peculiar, or in a lot of cases, it's really wonderful. I mean, there is stuff out there that I see in a parking lot, looking at this time of year with the colors changing and all. I wish I could paint stuff that I see that's just scattered around the landscape, you know, and rather haphazard. Oh yeah, here's 15 trees, and 5 of them are really bright red, and there's a few yellow ones and some green ones, and yeah, I just did this because this is the way the universe works, and you happen to be here, but I can never paint that. I see skies that, it's like, wow, if I actually tried to paint that sky and could do a really perfect representation of it, someone would say, that's the stupid-looking sky. I said, well, no, it's exactly the one that was outside my window 3 days ago. So I usually don't try to put a message. I mean, I have friends who, and I occasionally get art in galleries, but it's usually not beating them over the head with some kind of message that you have to hear because this is really important.
Right.
I figure that if the message is there, they will hear it, whether or not I tell them that it's there. So my art always is done from the perspective of, yes, there is somebody who's controlling all of this. And if you happen to open your eyes big enough, you can maybe see that there is something behind all this. But I'm not as overt with my message as some people are.
Maybe you don't need to be.
I kind of like to think I don't need to be.
Yeah. Well, listen, they're giving me the high sign, so we're going to have to ride out of here.
Okay.
But I thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you.
Marty Jones is the artist, and he's an excellent